The decision to come back to school at a mature age, at a higher education, involves a questioning of self-identity. For our group, we're focusing on non-traditional students, and non-traditional students are students who are typically over the age of 24. Non-traditional students face challenges, but for minority non-traditional students, they may face even more challenges involving like financial problems and like dealing with money for paying with school. Non-traditional students, less than 20% of students that attend UK are minorities, as you can see on this graph found on the University of Kentucky diversity website. Minority students typically deal with problems such as alienation, racism, and social and academic development. As you can see on this graph, the blue represents the white and the colored represents the minorities. In 2012, the average white household earned about 20 times as much as an African American household for their income, and at least 70 times as much as the Latino household. The cost of college is going up about 3.8% each year, so paying for college for minorities might be a struggle. The overall in-state college fees are increasing to about $22,000. On the University of Kentucky website, there are scholarships offered to minority non-traditional students. There were 9 that I found, but 2 include academic excellence scholarships. Basically, you have to have a minimum of 12 credit hours, and you have to have a GPA of 3.2. And if you do, then you get $1,000 per year. And the next one is the child care grant, and you have to have a child who's dependent on you.
Non-traditional students are typically a lot older, and they feel like they're just surrounded by a bunch of kids in the classroom. And you know, not only do they feel a lot older, but to a bunch of teens, they look a lot older, and this can lead to issues socially and in the classroom. This can lead to a lot of adversity. According to a lot of testimonials from them themselves, they feel, you know, ashamed, embarrassed, that they're just going through what these kids are going through, and they're just so much older than them. And typically, you would think that this would cause them to be shut in, but most of them talk a lot and confide in the professor, who's, you know, usually another adult. They're very active in the classroom most times. They will talk to the professor, honestly. I've seen many blogs saying that they'll actually go and say, you know, if I talk too much, stop, just because they've been through it all before. You know, they know not to be embarrassed or shy or, you know, stressed or anything like that under the surface. But there are things to help with these and cope, and there are support groups like NTSO, the Non-Traditional Student Organization. There's actually a branch of this at UK. It's just a group that meets and gives tips on how to handle classroom stuff, social stuff, and just fit in. And this really helps deal with that adversity that they face in the classroom. And lots of ways of going about this are by getting involved. A lot of them can also, there are other classes that you can get involved in. Now a lot of them like don't want to do it because it's just more that they have to deal with, more kids they have to fit in with, but they don't realize, you know, that numbers of non-traditional students are growing. And getting involved in something like choir of sorts can definitely help you cope with it and like lessen the stress levels, because a lot of them are balancing a lot of other things, and you know, it helps them be less shy and just fit in more, and you know, the less stress you have, the more you're going to excel in your schoolwork.
Many non-traditional college students have to pay for their entire college by themselves. As you can see, like the unemployment, as it continued to go higher, the more college students started to come. They're finding that they're not having the qualifications for the jobs, or there's not any job market. So they're going back to school to like complete an entirely different degree that has better stability. This one shows that 78% of non-traditional students work full-time. 70% of employers are now offering educational assistance because they're finding that by paying their tuition, they're able to recruit a more talented workforce. They also get to keep their good employees and help them shows some of the advantages and disadvantages of working while going to school. A lot of non-traditional students choose a degree program that works directly with their career that they have already. They also gain more skills and are better prepared for working. However, it also limits class scheduling. It can be very challenging and stressful on them, and many have dependents on of their own, so they have to balance that family and work and whatnot. Since most non-traditional college students have to pay for their entire education, colleges and universities are working to accommodate that. They're offering more night classes, they're developing online curriculum and providing courses at satellite locations, and 75% of non-traditional college students said that their employers were very accommodating and flexible to their schedules.
Non-traditional students, one of the biggest things that really faces them as far as adversities is having to miss out on being with their families. Typically non-traditional students, when they go back to school, they are going because they want to provide a better life and more income for their families. This is just kind of a graph that shows most frequently experienced psychological issues of adult college students, and the second one on the list was not spending time with friends, family, and loved ones. This kind of missing the family kind of goes back to they have to balance their work schedule with their school schedule. Typically they work full-time, so with this full-time work, trying to balance that between schoolwork and homework, it leads to probably they have to take night classes, most likely, or online courses. But night classes, they don't offer the same variety typically that daytime classes would, and online classes lack interaction with others, so their grades seem to falter, as well as they kind of get to this point where they no longer have enough time to sleep. A couple of the things that I think that the University of Kentucky could do potentially to try to help non-traditional students are to provide more academic advisors to help them with their scheduling, as well as a wider variety of night classes and nighttime office hours with the professors for students who need extra help who are stuck in these night classes that could not come during the day because of work, as well as perhaps maybe an online tutoring for students who have to take online classes. One of the biggest things for most people, though, is their family. So having to miss out on family kind of deters a lot of people from going to school. If the University of Kentucky did provide more help with students who are non-traditional students, as far as, like I had said in the previous slide, it could not only increase the money that they were getting because people would have to pay tuition to come back, but it would also kind of create this legacy of people going to the University of Kentucky, because whenever they got out of school and their kids grew up, their kids would think, oh, I want to go to the same school my dad did.
I'm going to talk about non-traditional graduate students. A lot of the issues they face are very similar to undergraduate students, but there are a little bit of difference. There are a lot of reasons people go back to graduate school. One of the biggest ones is economics. I read an article about a bookstore owner, an independent bookstore owner, who, with the internet and everything, was not going to make any money and decided to go back and get a master's in education. And this is about the distinction between traditional and non-traditional students. Typically, they're between traditional students are between 22 and 30 years old, whereas non-traditional students are over the age of 30, have kids or dependent parents, and maybe can't spend as much time on campus as traditional students. And many of the issues, as I said, that these students face are similar to undergraduate students, but one of the biggest ones that they might face is difficulty in finding a faculty mentor, just because they can't spend as much time on campus doing their coursework. So some faculty may not be as accommodating to their schedules as some others might. And this is just an example from UK. It's a program for international students. It's a one-year certificate program for students from abroad. And these students already have more than 10 years of professional experience. And they go around to public and private companies, and this just gives them experience in American culture and practice in English, and it's a good program for connecting not only UK to the rest of the world, but the US to the rest of the world.
All right, very nice. Good job, guys. Okay, so we'll open it up. Any questions for folks? Comments or ideas? Non-traditional students? All right, well, I guess I have my first question, and it goes back to what Samantha, you just wrote about, or you mentioned about the graduate students. Are they also bringing families as well? Do you-
Some of them are, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them have to care for either dependent children or they have parents who are older and need
Mm-hmm.
them to take care of them. So they have to deal with that.
Sure. Do you know about any programs, or would it be possible to send some of our non-traditional students overseas as well?
I didn't find any in what I looked at, but I'm sure there's some.
Okay. All right, all right. And then, let's see, Allie, I think you brought in some of the racial demographics, right? So what was surprising in some of the stuff you found there, or things maybe you didn't know about?
I mean, I didn't realize like how big the gap was between like minority students and like non-minority students.
Mhm.
So I thought that was surprising that like less than 20% of minorities attended UK.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then how does that work then with some of the non-traditional students? Are they more minority, or does it?
Typically not, because
Mhm.
like coming back to school like involves a lot of money.
Right.
And so if they're not getting like a lot of income, then it might be challenging for them to come back.
Sure. All right. Very good. Very good. And let's see, Nick. I saw you did the Billy Madison. That's Billy Madison, right?
Yeah.
Right. What? Well, I guess that movie does make sort of light some of those issues. But what are some of the major issues you mentioned, like emotional things that some of the folks face?
Major issues they obviously they are already older than everyone else, but in the kids' eyes, it's just like the difference is so much more significant seeing someone that much older in a classroom, and in their minds, they're just being judged and they're embarrassed, ashamed. It puts a lot of stress on them, which makes the schoolwork harder, and just stuff like that. And I was shocked to find out, that they talk a lot, and even from personal experience, I have a few in classes, and they just questions on questions on questions, and what I've read I've read like 2 testimonials, 2 blogs that said, they do that because they're not like, even if they're embarrassed, they've been through it before, they were kids, they know that you should just not worry about it, but they try to ask questions that they think the kids won't, because a lot of kids in college classrooms will have questions they're wanting to ask the professor, but they're just lazy or just don't care enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so they hope that that'll help, the other students like warm up to them and help them fit in a little more.
Cool. All right. So let's see. I guess maybe the same question could go for Paige and Katie. The non-traditional students, I guess, are usually over the age of 30, right? So I'll start with Katie then. Katie, what do you think when you're thinking, I guess, when you're in high school about what you're going to be when you're 30? What kind of thoughts crossed your mind?
Like for me, I probably thought I would already be out of school and have a job and have a family.
Right.
I guess for like most people, they're probably like, well, why aren't you working? Why are you going back to school? You should have already done that.
Mm-hmm. Right. But also, I guess it was mentioned that some of the people getting retrained, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of employers are finding that they can no longer just train their employees for specific jobs. They have to the employees have to have college education,
Sure.
and degrees. So like they're just sending them back because it's a lot cheaper than training them themselves.
All right. So then I'll finish up with Paige then. So Paige, what's your major right now? Sorry?
English.
English? All right. So what if you decide that your English major is not going to work for you, and in 20 years you want to come back to school to study something that's completely new? What's going to happen?
I mean, honestly, I don't know what I'd study at that point anymore, just because right now it's like that's all I can really picture myself doing.